Okay, the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift has come to an end and the winner is Ferrand-Prevot. Now, over the last couple of years, it's become a tradition on this channel to do a tier list video after a men's Grand Tour, and I want to do the same with the Tour de France Femmes. Basically, I'm gonna rate every single team at this race from S tier, the best of the best, all the way down to DNS. They might as well have stayed home. Anyway, the table is set, time to start with our first team, KICKR Zonda Crypto. Last year, Kasia Niewiadoma won the Tour de France, but it wasn't realistic to have that same expectation for this year. She does podium the race for the 4th time in a row. She was well supported by her teammates like Chloe Dygert, but I did miss a competitiveness for a stage win for this team. B tier for KICKR Zonda Crypto, our first team on the board. Now, at this Tour de France, there's quite a few teams that are relatively small teams, like Winspace Orange Seal. So my expectations for this team in the run-up to the race weren't that high. Now, this team was present in breakaways with the likes of Fiona Mangan, but their best performance in this race was undoubtedly on the final mountain stage, Nadia Gontova getting a top 10. D tier for the Winspace team, in my opinion. Now our next team, Roland Le Devolwy, is on paper a World Tour team, but they don't perform like that. Like they weren't completely invisible, but they just don't influence the race at all. DNS for the Roland team, I'm afraid. Our next team, Volker Wessels, is a completely different story. A pro team that overperforms. Maud Rijnbeek was super active in the first couple of stages and breakaways, but I reckon their best talent is Eline Janssen, scoring a very nice 3 top 10s in the first 4 stages. That is great. She's super versatile, she can get over a climb and still have a sprint. And Janssen is only 23, so I expect her to be in a World Tour team in the future. A C tier rating for Volker Wessels. Our next team had a pretty sad start to this Tour de France. UAE Team ADQ lost Elisa Longo-Borghini due to gastro issues in the first few days. But in the second half of this race, this team fought back. Maeva Squibon, the revelation of this race, taking 2 stage victories from the breakaway. That's insane. And honestly, just as impressive, Dominika Vlodarczyk getting a top 5 in GC after a super consistent race. Next to that, a podium by Lara Gillespie and some attacks by Brody Chapman. Honestly, a well-deserved S-tier Tour de France by UAE Team ADQ. The first team at the top of our ranking. Saint-Michel Aubert 93 is once again a small team. Did you see my French there? Ooh la la. Anyway, Alicia Gonzalez scored a nice top 10 in stage 4, but my most impressive performance from this team was Emilie Morier in stage 9, finishing 12th. D tier for Saint-Michel Aubert, I'm not repeating that number. Now, Cofidis was on paper going to be relevant in this race because Julie Bégaud, their young French talent, was a candidate for the white jersey, but she wasn't really competitive in the race. And I gotta say, the rest of the team was basically invisible, so I didn't see them much. I'm sorry, but it's a DNS. They might as well have not been here. Next up, a team with a proper budget, Little Trek. In the first couple of stages, they were quite active with Shirin van Androoy attacking a few times, but it was quite sad to see Niamh Fisher-Black lose time because of a mechanical in the first few days. But in the mountains, this team had a plan. They went into the Madeleine stage, sending Niamh Fisher-Black up the road with a tug buddy, Rianne Marcus. Gradually moving up GC in the last 2 mountain stages, finishing 15 GC, so a top 5. B tier, a solid Tour de France for this team. The riders in our next team showed a decent level. Phoenix de Koning with Puck Pieterse, Royakkers, Kastelein. They were pretty active, but at the end of this Tour de France, the results kind of aren't there. They were never really competitive for any stage, and on stage 9, Paulina Royakkers had a bit of a shocker, losing her top 5 in GC. D tier for Phoenix de Koning. Now our next team had a pretty great Tour de France Femme, AG Insurance Soudal. Kim Lecourt-Pinard had a fantastic start to this race, multiple days in the yellow jersey and a stage win. But they had another race up their sleeve, Sarah Gigante, top 3 climber in the world, and she delivered on Côte de la Madeleine, finishing 2nd. But Gigante's descending has actually improved in the last couple of years, but it's still a weakness, and on stage 9, on the Jouplan descent, it became the nail in the coffin. The result was basically a freefall in GC all the way down to P6. Still a pretty good result for Sarah Gigante, and the team rallying around her was great to see. Justine Hekere, Julie van der Velde, Kim Lecourt-Pinard in yellow, Donna Steeking for Sarah. Great teamwork. An 8-tier Tour de France by AG Insurance Soudal. Laboral Cuccia is once again a smaller team. They were in the breakaway a few times with Catalina Soto, but maybe I expected more from Ostolaza. D tier for Laboral Cuccia. Our next team, Human Powered Health, was pretty similar with Ruth Edwards being active in breakaways, but she also podiumed the stage. In the meanwhile, Barbara Malcotti was pretty consistent in GC, finishing 12th. C tier for Human Powered Health. I'll be honest, this next team, Yono Mobility, is impossible to judge. Literally most of their team crashed out. I guess DNS because most of their riders didn't start most of the stages. Arkea B&B Hotels was pretty active in breakaways with the likes of Lotte Klaas and Clémence Latimier, but at the end of the day, you can't expect these riders to be competitive in the breakaways. That said, it is a shame that Valentina Cavallard, their climber, did not make it to the mountains. DNS for Arkea because this team didn't really impact the race. Movistar is usually a team to be reckoned with in women's cycling, but in this Tour de France, not so much. They started the race with Marlene Reusser as their GC leader, but she was so sick in the run into this race that in stage 1, she literally could not follow the peloton. On paper, Liana Lippert is then the team's second leader, but she crashed on stage 1. Despite that, she actually topped 5 stage 2 and 3. D tier for Movistar in this Tour de France. Our next team deserves a solid rating, Picnic Postenel. This team was super active in the first few stages by attacking left and right with Franziska Koch and Francesca Barale. Sure, not exactly competitive to win a stage from the breakaway, but they were visible. And in the meanwhile, their young climber, Nienke Vinke, secured the white jersey as the best U23 rider in the race. B tier, a solid Tour de France by Picnic Postenel. Our next team is Evacation Oatly. Personally, I'm a massive fan of Demon Descenders, and this team has that. Cédrine Kerbal is a Demon Descender. I would say she's not as skillful as a Kasia Niewiadoma, but she is super fast because she takes big risks. And of course, taking risks can pay off, like on stage 7 when Kerbal took time in the final descent. But sadly, at the foot of the Jouplan climb on the final mountain stage, Cédrine took too many risks at a completely unnecessary moment, and she lost her top 5 thanks to a crash. But for this team as a whole, I just expected a little bit more from individual riders for potential competitiveness for stage victories. A C tier rating for Evacation Oatly. Now let's talk about Liv Alula Jaco. Honestly, if you asked me before this race started what the odds are of Mavi Garcia winning a stage at this Tour de France Femmes, I would have responded with near 0%. Don't get me wrong, she's a solid climber, consistent throughout the season, she dares to attack, but most of the time, her attacks fail. But on stage 2 of this Tour de France, Mavi Garcia secured the biggest victory of her career, attacking in the last 20 kilometers and holding it to the finish line. Gotta say, that was pretty epic. By the way, I find it pretty ridiculous that Ella Wiley, who is 22 years old, is not eligible for the white jersey. Not to take away from the achievement of Nienke Vinke, but there's only 12 riders eligible in this race for the white jersey, so that's too restrictive. For a second, imagine if the white jersey battle in this Tour de France Femmes was U25 instead of U23. We'd have a super close fight between Sarah Gigante, Flodarczyk, Fisher Black, Kerbal, and that's the list. That's epic. Anyway, a B tier rating for Liv Alula Jaco. Okay, time to answer the question, is SD-Works Pro Time washed? Like sure, in this race, Lotte Kopecky was not at her usual level, but I do expect her to come back at a high level in the future. But I do have to applaud the teamwork from Kopecky and Van der Breggen for their teammate, Lorena Wiebes, who won 2 stages and the green jersey. Like, it is simple, Wiebes is the best sprinter in the world and no one is close. And I have to give a small hat tip to the final stage of Van der Breggen because that solo was incredible. A tier for SD-Works Pro Time. Last year, our next team, Ceratizit, had a fairy tale Tour de France with a stage win of Cédrine Kerbal. But I have to say, this year, not exactly a successful Tour de France. 1 top 10 in a stage by Sarah Van Dam and some unsuccessful breakaway attempts. A D tier Tour de France by Ceratizit. Anyway, with 2 teams to go, this is what our tier list looks like. Let's talk about Visma Lease Bike. First of all, Marianne Vos wins stage 1 and takes the first yellow jersey, wearing it for a couple of days, and after that, gets second twice behind Wiebes. That's already a pretty good start for the team. But outside of stage 1, Pauline Ferrand-Prevot didn't spend a second in the wind before the last 2 mountain stages. And on the Queen stage, on the Côte la Madeleine, Pauline Ferrand-Prevot absolutely destroys the competition, winning the stage and taking the yellow jersey. Honestly, the story of Pauline Ferrand-Prevot is pretty incredible. Back in 2014, a road cyclist winning the World Championships, podiuming the Giro, then doing mountain bike, winning Olympics, Worlds, etc. I'm not an expert of mountain bike, but I've read myself up. And after that, coming back in 2025, signing for Visma Lease Bike, stating the desire to win the Tour de France Femmes within the next 3 years. In the first year, winning Paris-Roubaix Femmes and the Tour de France Femmes. I'm sorry, but she basically completed road cycling. Of course, an S-tier Tour de France for Visma Lease Bike. Our final team to discuss is FDJ Suez, who arrived at this Tour de France with the big favorite, Demi Vollering, and the best team. But on stage 3, it already goes wrong. Demi Vollering crashes in a sprint stage. Reality is, in the final of a sprint stage, there are 2 ways for a GC team to keep their GC leader safe. One of which is having your GC rider entirely at the front of the peloton with your entire team around her. But in that case, you have to be good enough to keep that front position. The other option is what Ferrand-Prevot was doing in this stage, sitting towards the back of the peloton with a buffer of space around you so that if someone crashes in front of you, you can react. But in this case, FDJ Suez tried option 1 to keep Vollering at the front, but failed to do so, and she slipped back into the washing machine belly of the peloton. That is simply the worst place to be in the final of a sprint stage to avoid crashes. Of course, the crash itself is not the fault of FDJ Suez, but Vollering's position is their responsibility. Now, crash to the side, I do want to talk about their tactics. On stage 6, 7 and 8 in the run-up to Côte de la Madeleine, there's multiple moments where Ferrand-Prevot and Gigante are off the back in a descent, and FDJ Suez responds by letting them come back? I'm sorry, but what is the point in having the best team in this race if you don't use those riders to keep your GC competitors behind? But I gotta be honest, it is not just team tactics, it's also Demi Vollering her decision making herself. Pure self-sabotage. The perfect example is stage 8. On the Côte de la Madeleine, we've got in the breakaway Marion Benel, KICKR and Muzic. So 3 on paper satellite riders. KICKR waits for Gigante, Benel waits for Ferrand-Prevot, but at FDJ Suez, Demi Vollering says in her radio that Muzic should ride for her own results despite Muzic being virtually behind Vollering in GC. That makes no sense. Another example is her wasting energy sprinting against Maeva Squibon at QOM points to try and defend the consolation prize QOM jersey of Elise Chabi. Focus on your GC, focus on saving your energy, focus on trying to win the race. Anyway, despite that whole rant, Demi Vollering also just simply was not good enough on Madeleine to be competitive with Ferrand-Prevot, regardless of tactics or decision making, so it wouldn't have mattered too much for P1. B-tier Tour de France by FDJ Suez. There we go then, that is my tier list. And as always, now it's your turn. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.